Welcome to Byte-Sized Tech, where we blend casual conversations with insightful discussions on the latest in technology and gadgets. You know, it feels like just this morning, we're all sort of bracing for more trade drama, and then bam, the tech world is just buzzing with a totally different energy.
Yeah, it's quite the turnaround.
Seriously, stocks for some of the big players are really taking off. We're seeing Apple up over 5%, Amazon around 7%, NVIDIA charging ahead by 6%, and Tesla also seeing a nice bump over 6% too. It's quite a shift.
And what's really interesting about that jump, that immediate reaction, is what it signals, right? It's like this collective sigh of relief across the market.
Right.
The proposed tariff hikes from, well, recent past had cast this long shadow, lots of uncertainty.
Oh, yeah.
So this news of a potential easing, especially that reported 90-day pause on some tariffs, it seems to have injected some much-needed optimism back in, particularly for these big tech names.
Yeah, exactly. And it wasn't that long ago, like you said, we were staring down the barrel of tariffs possibly going through the roof.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe hitting, 145% on some things coming from China, and retaliatory tariffs heading our way too.
Crazy numbers being thrown around.
Now, the conversation seems to be more around like a 30% tariff on certain Chinese goods coming into the U.S.
Okay.
And maybe 10% on U.S. goods going into China. I mean, that's a noticeable difference, right?
It is. But, stepping back and looking at the bigger picture, this isn't necessarily a full-scale retreat from trade tensions altogether.
Okay.
We've heard Treasury Secretary Bessent talk about something called strategic decoupling.
Strategic decoupling. What does that mean exactly?
Well, think of it maybe like a company deciding, okay, we'll outsource our catering. That's fine. But our core product development, we keep that in-house.
Yeah.
Security concerns,
Okay.
So the U.S. appears to be aiming to separate areas with, significant national security implications.
Right, like the advanced AI stuff.
Exactly, preventing that from getting into the wrong hands, separating that from the broader economic relationship with China.
So it's kind of like saying, we still want to trade where it makes sense and isn't like a major security risk.
Pretty much.
The U.S. still wants to sell, less sensitive tech and maybe certain semiconductors to that huge Chinese market.
That seems to be the idea. And it's also worth noting the significant investments being made right here domestically.
In the U.S. tech sector.
Yeah, huge announcements. We're seeing figures totaling over, $1.5 trillion in areas like semiconductor manufacturing, AI infrastructure.
Right.
So this push towards more domestic production, and that could be a really key part of this whole strategy.
And speaking of big players, we even heard President Trump mention talking with Apple's Tim Cook.
Saw that.
Suggesting he's kind of expecting more U.S. investment from them. But let's be real, Apple is still looking at a 20% tariff on iPhones shipped from China.
Right, that hasn't gone away.
That's still a pretty considerable cost, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. They'll have to figure out how to navigate that. Maybe they absorb some of it, maybe, adjust prices a bit, protect those margins.
Yeah, and that raises a really important point about, adaptation. While there's this hope for more U.S.-based investment,
Sure.
the existing tariffs on key products like the iPhone mean companies like Apple, well, they have some tough strategic decisions to make. Pricing, supply chains.
Definitely. And interestingly, there's also that ongoing buzz about a potentially significant iPhone redesign coming down the line.
Oh, yeah. When?
Maybe around 2027 is the speculation. Things like foldable screens, maybe, or even Apple getting into home robotics.
Home robotics. Wow.
Yeah, so those kinds of big innovations could also play a role in their future pricing strategies,
Huh. So, okay, while the big immediate reaction is positive relief, it sounds like companies are still very much in a wait-and-see mode, but also, actively looking at diversifying, getting supply chains out of just China.
Absolutely, reducing that risk.
Yeah.
And technology itself is playing a really fascinating role in this shift.
How so?
Well, there was a recent report, I think it was Bloomberg Technology, about an AI platform that can help companies find vetted U.S. suppliers just by uploading a photo of their product.
No way, just a photo.
Yeah. Imagine cutting down that whole supplier search process from months potentially down to mere days.
Wow, talk about efficiency.
Yeah.
Just snap a pic and find a U.S. manufacturer. That kind of tech could be a real game changer for companies trying to pivot quickly.
It really could. But ultimately, like you said earlier, it comes down to the bottom line, doesn't it?
Always does.
Will these companies be able to absorb potentially higher U.S. manufacturing costs, or will that eventually, trickle down to us, the consumers?
Yeah, that's the question. It feels like having multiple supply chain options is becoming less of a nice to have and more of a, well, a necessity now.
Precisely. And it seems the U.S. government is also taking maybe a more refined approach to technology export restrictions. We've seen some adjustments to those earlier kind of broad restrictions on AI chip exports. Remember those? They raised some concerns among allies.
Right, that it might hurt partners.
Exactly. So the focus now seems to be moving towards maybe a more case-by-case evaluation for technology exports.
That makes sense, I suppose. You don't want to inadvertently, hinder global innovation.
Right.
Because advancements in China can sometimes lead to breakthroughs that actually benefit the U.S. too,
That's a very important point.
It sounds like the emphasis might be shifting towards really cracking down on, intellectual property theft, which feels more targeted than just broad restrictions.
That seems to be a key distinction they're trying to make, and we've seen examples of just how complex this all is.
Like what?
Well, like the Chinese battery giant, CATL, they apparently want to establish factories here in the U.S. but are facing certain hurdles.
Okay.
And similarly, their recent IPO in Hong Kong had restrictions preventing U.S. investors from participating.
Why was that?
Citing national security concerns and, well, competition in the electric vehicle battery market, it really highlights the intricacies of this whole strategic decoupling thing.
It's definitely a tangled web, isn't it?
It really is.
Okay, switching gears slightly, but still related to big tech navigating tricky situations. There was also some discussion recently around Tesla, wasn't there? About safety culture.
Ah, yes, that came up. The argument being made, I think, was about how a culture that maybe discourages dissent or raising concerns, well, that can potentially hinder safety efforts.
Right, and contrasting Tesla's approach, perhaps, with companies like, say, Boeing back in the day or Alcoa.
Where safety was really prioritized by empowering employees at all levels to, stop the line or raise concerns without fear.
Exactly. And there are ongoing concerns, obviously, about Tesla's autopilot system and its safety record compared to some competitors in the autonomous vehicle space, like Waymo.
Yeah, that comparison comes up a lot. It's definitely another complex area within the tech world involving risk, culture, and public perception.
Well, this has been a really fascinating look at the immediate ripples from these potential trade shifts and also some of the longer-term implications, too.
Indeed. It's a landscape that's just constantly evolving, isn't it? And that interplay between trade policy, national security, and pure technological innovation, it's going to continue to be something we all watch very closely.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for tuning in to Byte-Sized Tech. If you enjoyed this quick dive into the latest tech news and analysis, be sure to hit that like button.
Yeah, let us know what you think.
Drop a comment with your thoughts, share with anyone who might find it interesting, and of course, subscribe so you don't miss our next Tech Deep Dive.
We'll catch you next time.